Hi everybody. So this is the last full week of this course that we have, and just a really quick recap of what we were doing this last few weeks. In the first week we examined the origins of the Middle Ages, which were Roman culture as well as the emergence of Christianity, and we saw why it's important to examine these issues in relation to the Middle Ages. And then week 2 and week 3 of the semester we examined the Middle Ages. And it's befitting that we dedicated 2 weeks of the semester because it's such a long period, 1,000 years, and as you can see, it's not homogeneous at all. Like, a lot of stuff happens, and it moves from being very chaotic with local rulers into having this centralization, a renaissance, and great achievements. What we're doing this week, the 4th week, is that we're moving to the early modern period, basically from the 15th into the 18th century. Your readings yesterday covered the 14th century, which is known as the century of disasters, of catastrophes, basically because of the Black Death, the plague, famine, the 100-year wars, as well as, by the way, the fall of the Byzantine Empire, that empire that lasted 1,000 years and finally collapses. It is conquered by the Muslim Turks. And then you also read about Renaissance and the emergence of humanism in the 15th century. Your readings for today were about religious reform and the emergence of Protestantism. And that historical phenomena is also connected to Renaissance and to humanism, specifically the kind of critical thinking, the kind of emphasis of man as a thinker, as man at the center of all things. That emphasis really helped the kind of thinking that the Reformation propagated, as well as, of course, the invention of movable print, and you've read about it in your readings. You will also read today about all the religious wars that took place in the 16th century, but also in the 17th century. And really, these events changed the religious worldview of Europeans forever. They thought differently about the relation between the secular world and the sacred realm, about the relationship between the individual believer and God, and also, after the religious wars, European rulers viewed religious division as extremely dangerous to their rule and to the stability of the state. Now tomorrow you'll read about another phenomena that began in the 16th century and changed the worldview of Europeans forever, and that's the era of geographical discoveries and European expansion. By the end of the 15th century, the Portuguese and the Spanish crossed the oceans, the Indian, the Pacific, and the Atlantic Oceans. By the 16th century, the English, the French, and the Dutch follow suit, and from the 17th century, Europeans also expand into the Americas, and that creates a new reality. There's a new global exchange of crops, of diseases, of all kinds of goods, but also, unfortunately, a new global exchange of people, trade in people. Slavery existed in Europe before that, but slavery, the kind of slavery that begins really from the 15th century, is new, and that's slavery with Africans. Africans increasingly filled the ranks of slaves, and what happens is that race and color becomes the markers of slavery in Europe. Finally, tomorrow you'll also be reading about how basically in the early modern period the European worldview was also changed because of the scientific revolution. Here too there's a huge importance to the Renaissance in the 15th and 16th century and to humanism. Humanism affected the kind of scientific thinking that was new in medicine, in anatomy, in astronomy, and in other scientific fields and disciplines. So in conclusion, there are 2 points that I'd like to emphasize. First of all, The geographic discoveries, the scientific discoveries, as well as the religious reform movements in the 16th century caused a monumental shift in European attitudes. Secularization began to sweep over Europe. And it's not that people suddenly became atheists and renounced their religious beliefs, but they did insist that special attention be paid to the secular interests of the states and scientific knowledge. They believe the scientific knowledge, that educating the wider population and not only the elite classes could diminish religious violence and superstition. And this is new. The second important point that I want to make about the readings for this week is that one of the ideals that I talked about in the PowerPoint presentation in the opening, in the first week of the semester, that one of the notions, one of the ideals that Europe is identified with, that Western culture is identified with, is the ideal of progress. And I told you that what we're going to do during this semester, during this course, is really problematize these notions of the West being advanced and the notion of progress. And here, the readings this week should really make us ask, should really make you ask, what is progress? Yes, we can talk about progress in terms of technology. We can talk about scientific progress, definitely in the early modern period. But can we talk about progress in modern, in moral terms? Did European morality progress somehow in a positive way in the early modern period? We always see cruelty in European history, but the kind of human exploitation, the new kind of trade in people that we see in the 17th and 18th century, in the early modern period in Europe, is really on a completely new scale. And so here's the question to ask, when we're kind of now towards the end of the period of our course. Can we talk about European progress in moral terms? So as always, please email me if you have any questions about the readings. I'm always happy to help and answer. And here's an extra credit question for you. The first one, to email me a 2-paragraph description of the notion, the Protestant notion of faith versus good works. Will get 2 extra points for your final grade. So again, a 2-paragraph description in which you explain how the Protestants viewed the notion of faith versus good works. Okay? So I hope you have fun with the readings this week, and I'll be in touch.